Well, thank you everyone for coming today. Let me now introduce our speaker for today, Rita Barber, who will be talking about careers. Rita, take it away.
Thank you so much, Nishant. Hi, everybody. I am going to turn it over mainly to you because this is a Q&A session, meaning you ask the questions and I'll give you the answers. But let's talk about some of what goes on in careers just to get your wheels spinning, so to speak. Here's what I've noticed throughout the years with people looking to change careers or move up into their careers. Normally, what stops a person from achieving their goals career wise has to do with underestimating themselves. They underestimate the tools that they already have. They don't quite understand what the most important skills are. They think that maybe it's limited to knowing a particular kind of software, where, yes, of course, you might need to know a software, but a lot of times, even more important still, are the transferable skills that a person brings to the table. And this is the thing that a lot of times people underestimate themselves with in every direction. The other thing, too, is how much experience you do or don't have. People either think they're too young or they think that they're too old, or they think that because they have children, they probably aren't going to be hired, particularly if they are a woman. And sometimes that can be true, but there are ways around that too. And I love to talk about those particular things because I believe in busting those ideas out, throwing them out the window, and hopefully giving you a new paradigm to consider when you're looking to make a change in your career. So, having said those fun things, I'm ready to take any kind of a career question that you have under the sun and walk you through some thoughts with it. But it's not just limited to me to answer. This is the thing that I always love about groups, because somebody might be here who has an even better perspective than I have. Don't be shy. Share your thoughts. Let's all grow together. All right. So I'm opening it up to the floor. I just want to say that y'all are on mute. So if you want to say something, unmute yourself. Oh, that'd be a great name for a conference, right? Okay.
I think an important question probably to get us going is how do we know when we need a career change or some kind of transfer? How
What's the first thing?
what's the key? Yeah, what are the key indicators to know that we've got to start
Looking for a different position. I would say, I mean, you could look at your paycheck and that might give you some indication. Outside of your paycheck, I would say it's your energy level. Because if you're not getting the same satisfaction from your job, which can happen for all number of reasons, your energy is going to start to dwindle. Instead of waking up and feeling like you're going to take on the day, you feel like, I wonder if I can stand through the day, go through the day. You come home and you're a little bit fried. You're not as patient as you would maybe like to be. You're tired. You just want to go to bed. You want to relax. You want to forget about the day. Any of those different things, anything negative that pops up at all, is a good indication that maybe you're just not as fulfilled as you once were in the career that you had. So it might be time to consider something different. Now, just to take it a step further, though, it could also have to do with your boss. If you have a boss who is, uh, this is non Toastmaster language, but what the heck? If you have a boss who's a real jerk, that can really exhaust you. And it can make you feel like, I just don't really think I want to be here. So it's important to look at all the different elements of your environment as you consider what's the best direction for you to go. Is that helpful?
Yes, let me unmute myself. Yes, it is very helpful.
Okay. All right. Another question? You're on mute.
Unmute yourself.
Shamala's been speaking. Sorry, Shamala, go for it.
I was on double mute. So unmuting myself 2 times. Rita, often what I noticed is in when I was trying for a different role that I don't have an experience in, even though I know I can do it, the confidence level is so low because there is a factor of fear of failure. It is not an easy thing to handle that, especially at work environment. At Toastmasters, yes, we can do that, but how do you encourage members or anyone who is listening to this meeting now? How do you encourage us to overcome that fear and then go for it?
Is that one think about with Toastmasters is that it is a learning lab. And the other thing with Toastmasters is that it is a micro environment of what the real world is in every way, shape, and form. When you start to think about that, you think about things that you try in Toastmasters that at first it's kind of like, well, I don't know how that's going to work. And you surprise yourself. You see that you can do more. Eventually, you start to realize that if that can be true in one scenario, maybe it can be true in another scenario. Now, you had mentioned that you think to yourself, well, I think I can do it, but I'm afraid in case I fail. There's one of two directions for you to go. One is to just go ahead and fail because that's what you've told yourself that you're going to do. The other direction is to say, no, I'm going to boost myself. I'm going to give this the best show possible. And one thing I know that you and I have spoken about, which I think is good for people to hear, is that always consider making yourself the sort of example that you will want your kids to be. You know, if you want you if one day your daughter or your son were to come to you and say, I'm thinking about trying a particular career, but I'm really afraid I think I might fail, what would you be able to share with them about yourself that would tell them that no, you go for it, don't just not try it, just go ahead and try it? Is that helpful?
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much, Rita.
You're welcome. Okay, other questions out there?
What are your thoughts around um, making a job change versus, I would say, a career change? You know, a full 180, doing something completely different versus trying maybe just a different position in the field that you're in. Do you have anything to say about that?
I do. I can just share my own personal experiences. First up, I have to say that I was in that work generation initially where we started to look at things differently. We didn't think about the gold watch any longer and about staying with one company until retirement. This was something that my dad thought of. My dad had decided that he was going to stay in the same career for his whole life, in the same company for his whole life. And I was a recruiter early on in my career. And I remember calling up my dad because he was going to be the perfect person for this position I was trying to fill. I mean, the nerve of me, jeez. So I call up my dad and I'm like, hey, I've got this position you should really look at. And he goes, I'm not leaving this company. I would never leave this company. It would be the wrong thing to do. I'm kind of like, oh, wow. And he says, and you remember that because you should stay right where you are forever. Just stay there. Well, eventually, what ended up happening was, of course, needless to say, he didn't go for the job. I started to feel burnt out being a recruiter, but I wasn't sure if I was feeling burnt out being a recruiter because of the company that I was with. It certainly wasn't my boss. My boss was great. But the company that I was with, I don't know. I wasn't really sure if I was feeling burnt out because they were boring to me. And I did go to another company in a recruiting position again, one that was offering quite a good promotion for me too. At that company, I totally found out that I was just tired of being a recruiter. I was done. And I remember sitting at my desk thinking to myself, well, that's it. I know I'm done. And I'm looking around, I'm thinking to myself, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I remember thinking, you know what I really like to do? I like telephones. They're great. They make a lot of money for recruiters. Okay. I pick up the telephone, I call up one of my clients, who happened to be a telecommunications company, a head of telecommunications. And I said, hey, I want to change jobs. I want to go work for you. So can we talk about that? And he was just kind of like, oh, Rita, you know, you're great, but you have no outside sales experience. You have no this, you have no that, you have no the other thing. And I remember I just said to him, and that's what makes me a great hire because I've got no bad habits. So it's great. Let's just try this thing. And I ended up going to work there, and it was a very good, successful employment opportunity for me. I stayed with them for a number of years, loved what I did extremely well with it. So it was a good thing. So you could have one of two different things. The other thing I found out too, so I was in sales in one environment, and then for whatever reason, I thought to myself, I think engineering is where it's at. I want to be an engineer. So I went through this program that my company had while I was in sales. I learned how to be an engineer. And what I realized was I never saw so many people in my life disrespect engineers. It was horrible. And I was one of the people that they were disrespecting. And I just thought, no, I'm not having any of that. That's not happening. So I thought I need to get out of this whole engineer thing because this is apparently how they do things. And then I went back into sales again. So I changed companies, I changed industries, I changed what I did. Inevitably, the whole time that I was in telecommunications and then data communications and then tele and data communications, the whole time I kept my toes in the recruiting waters because I loved helping people find out about how they could get their positions and everything. So I just guess that that's just really part of who I am still, even though I don't really think I would want to work for a recruiting company again. I do love to share information with people about recruiting and about how to get their ideal job. I think I didn't quite get all of your question answered. Am I right about that, Carrie Lynn?
Actually, that was great because I mean you've had a lot of experience with all of it, so like that.
Yeah. I am inspired though by one thing in your story, Rita, in the sense that you, when he gave you all the no, you don't have this, you don't have that. How did you, in your mind, how did you come up with the answer? And that's what makes me a great hire because, you know, when somebody presents you with a list of no's, you flipped it somehow. How did you, where did that come from?
I think it's a matter of survival in my case. Seriously, it is. I mean, this is how I had to be my whole life. I just wouldn't accept no, and I would look for the flip side of everything. And I'd run with it. I remember the very first big girl job that I got was at the Bonaventure Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. It had just been opened up. It was a very big deal hotel. And they were looking to hire somebody to handle all of the retail management, all the retail. There was posh, high-end stuff. And if someone had a problem, I was supposed to be the person to come in and find out what was going on and help them out, and then go back to management in the hotel and say, this is what we have to do to fix this, you know, whatever it was. And they, after they hired me, they said, so how old are you? And I was 22, just barely out of college. This was my, like I said, my first grown-up job. And they said, oh no, we can't hire you. And, you know, I mean, one of the things that I thought about was, how old do I look? You know, what are they thinking here? I mean, I think I look about my age. And I said, why can't you hire me? This because you're way too young. You can never do this job. I said, of course I can do this job. You just hired me. I can do this job. And they were going to just throw me out anyway. And I said, wait a minute, let's do this. Give me 1 month. Give me 1 month. And if it doesn't look like I've got this under my belt, you can let me go. No harm, no foul. But if it looks like I'm on track and you give me a chance, I'll tell you, I will not let you down. I'll be a hard worker for you. And I'll try whatever different ideas because we were running into already problems with how the retail stores were growing because it was a brand new hotel and all that other stuff. I said, I'll try any ideas that you say, I'll implement them in the best way possible. So that was my way of trying to switch that around. And they did. I'm very happy to say they gave me a chance, and it was a very fun start in my life. Um, all I can say is you owe it to yourself to always listen to what someone says carefully and then decide what the trigger is that's the opposite of what they're saying, right? Just like if they say to you, oh, I've heard this before a lot of times, as a matter of fact. Well, it looks like maybe are you close to retirement age? Because maybe if you're close to retirement, this is not the position for you. And then what you can share then is, I think I bring a lot of wisdom to the table. Not that I would be sharing it at every turn, but I would look out for your company's best interest with that wisdom. And then that gives somebody an idea that you're a team player, right? Without saying it, you've said it. And you also are sharing that you've got knowledge too. So I guess the number one thing that I would say is never accept no for an answer. Don't. I absolutely will not accept no for an answer. I'll tell you right now, in anything and everything that I do. You're on mute.
That's invaluable advice. That's awesome. Don't take no for an answer.
Yeah. If you want to do it, go for it. And there's no one in the world that can advocate for yourself more than you. It's just that you do have to say to yourself, I'm not going to get emotional about this. I'm going to advocate for myself. I'm going to be my lawyer in my corner for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. Another question?
Rita, so I do have a question, and it's really relative to at least my age, because I know some other friends who have this issue as well. When you come out of college and it's only been about a couple of years since you've started accumulating your work, there's a awkward period where if you shift after 3 years, you don't have enough experience to go for maybe a senior role, or even if you do have the qualifications, you're very nervous. So I guess the question that I really want to ask is, how do you get yourself to be like, hey, let's move, let's make that decision? Like, even though the job that you're doing is good, the job that you're doing pays well, you're learning and everything, but you know that you've been in this job long enough that it's time to move. How do you get yourself to move? Like that's the biggest thing I have an issue with. Like, it's time for me to move, but I just can't seem to come to terms, or like, what do I do to get started or push myself?
I think the first thing is just ask yourself the question, do I owe it to myself to go for this? All right. And if you cannot ask yourself that question, which a lot of times we have problems asking ourselves questions like that, then someone who you are close to, but to be really honest with you, not somebody who's just going to say something just to make you happy, ask for their point of view. I want to go for this. I want to go in this direction. What do you think? What do you think that would look like for me? Would it work? Would there be some problems? What do you think? Listen to what that person has to say. And I will tell you, I'm a very big believer that the failure would not be in your trying and not succeeding. The failure would not be in your trying and they're saying, we want to put you somewhere else that you didn't think you wanted to go to begin with. The failure would be in your not trying. That's where the failure is. So you have to say to yourself, I'm not going to let failure happen to me. I'm going to move forward with it. It's harder to do when you're young, because as you grow older and you have different experiences happen to you. And I just so you know a little bit about me, I kind of grew up old to begin with because of the circumstances in my household and everything that was going on. And that ended up being a blessing, even though at the time, as I was going through different things, it certainly didn't feel like a blessing. But in my adult life, it did become a blessing because I applied things very differently. When you're in your 20s and you haven't had a lot of those experiences, it's not so easy, except that you say, look, I've got to start having these experiences. It needs to be now. and I'm going to go for it now. If you don't have a friend that you feel could really advise you, because maybe that person, as close a friend as that person is, doesn't have the wisdom that you're seeking, find somebody who does. I tend to say avoid relatives, because relatives tend to see you as 6 years old for their whole life, you know, and that's a little bit rough. But find somebody else who you know, who knows you, relatively speaking, who can give you some kind of feedback. Like if you were to come to me and say, here's what I'm thinking about doing, I'd give you feedback, because I think I know you enough that I could offer that to you, and you would know that. Give up. Don't not try. Do not try. That's, like I said, that is failure right there.
I do have a follow-up question, which is, I know the sessions on transitioning in your career, but how do you know not to transition? Which I feel like is also an important question, is maybe you haven't gotten enough from that current job that you could get more. Like, how do you identify that? What kind of metrics would you suggest to take a look at? Any kind of questions we can ask ourselves?
So if you are asking the question yourself about, am I ready for a transition? You probably are. If you are asking that question yourself, you're not, that question, if you're satisfied with what you're doing, if things of what you're doing, if it's going well for you, if it's working well for you, you're not going to have a reason to say, I wonder if I should be doing something else, because you're going to be too much in your happiness zone. Okay. If you are not there, and if you are asking yourself those questions, then the follow-up for you really does need to be, I need to look, I need to take a look. And just because you're looking doesn't mean that you're going to do it, right? You may say, I need to do something different, and you may interview in a position or two, and you may say no. You might say, this is definitely not a fit. There are other things that you can do, by the way, that kind of fit in, like job shadowing. And I'm sure everybody's heard about these different things, but job shadowing is when you find someone, or you ask to get connected with someone who is doing what you would like to do, or maybe is in an industry that you would like to be in. And you ask if you can spend a couple of hours, half a day, a whole day with that person. Watch what they're doing, ask them different questions about what it is that they're doing. And it helps you balance out and say, yeah, this would be a good thing for me, or it would not be a good thing for me. And job shadowings are a lot easier to put together than people think. People think that it's such a big problem, but people do like to help. That's what I've seen over and over again, and are willing to do that sort of thing. So that'll give you kind of an idea.
So a question about job shadowing. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. I know shadowing in high school, where we used to go and like shadow other kids and like private highs and everything when we're transitioning. But for job shadowing, especially with the COVID situation, like where everyone's remote, with the whole remote situation, how do you recommend we do you have any ideas on how we can go about that? Because since everything is like, meetings are online or work is online, yeah.
Yeah, that is trickier actually. And you know what? If you will remind me, I will totally look into that to see what they're doing in the Zoom world with regards to that. I can think of a couple of ways of doing it, but I don't know that they're necessarily valid. And I want to give you something that looks like it's a working model. So if you remind me about that, I'll check into it for you. Another thing that you could do is you could do an info interview, which is not as long as a job shadowing. And it's over the telephone a lot of times, or I would do it through Zoom, because I love to see people's eye contact. I love to see, I love to get a sense. I read people a lot, and I love to get a sense about how a person is. And that's a trait that everybody should try and develop in the course of their careers. So if I were you, I would do an info interview too, where you have a list of questions that are important to you. If you don't have enough questions, you can find even more questions, and you ask the questions and see what the person says. See if that makes sense. In fact, the fact of the matter is that probably doing an info interview before the job shadowing would be smart, so that you take that first step and you say, yeah, this is looking good. and then you take that second step. Doing those things will help you develop your self-confidence at any rate, not just for the position that you're checking out, but also your self-confidence in understanding how you operate and how when things work for you, you like them, you don't like them, how those are valid feelings that you have. And that's something that's super important because what happens is, especially when a person is younger, a lot of times they jump into something without really analyzing how they feel about it first. Largely because, and this has been true, I've noticed in Silicon Valley, largely because they're being paid a lot of money and they're thinking to themselves, wow, this is a lot of money. I'm a happy person. Money's not what makes a person happy most of the time, and they don't find out until they've been there for a while, and then they're crushed. They feel depressed. Everything is really rough on them. So better to do the homework first, so that when you do take the job, even with a lot of money, you feel happy. You feel like you can smile every single day because you're enjoying what you're doing.
Rita, you brought up something really amazing that it just triggered in my memory as well, because we work with a lot of teenagers. I'm still in the high school phase of my parenting. And, you know, a lot of kids don't know what they want to do, but some kids really do want to know. They do know what they want to do. And so I just tell them, if you can go meet somebody that does that today and ask them not just about the job itself, but ask them about their life, right? If they wanted to be a police officer, corrections officer, a lawyer, you know, an engineer, just ask them about their whole entire life. Like how is that all fitting? Because sometimes, you know, you hear these guys, like a corrections officer, their divorce rate is through the roof because they're not home with their families, right? And the wives or the husbands, you know, they're not getting the attention they need from the relationship. And so that was one of the things. My brother's a corrections officer, and true to form, he got a divorce also. And we spent a lot of time talking, you know, just about his ideas about what he thought went wrong. And he's just like, there's just not enough time at home. And I'm not the only one. And then sure enough, boom, one after the other after the other. And you begin to realize that that career, even though it's going to bring you a lot of money, there's a lot of other things in the life that's falling apart. So I would always tell the kids that I was mentoring, like, if that's truly what you want to do, go talk to somebody and ask them about their life, not just about the job, because, you know, the job, it will be interesting. I always knew in my mind at 14 that I wanted to go into finance, and here I am. But I love my job, and that allows me to have that work-life balance, you know, and I give that as an example. But, you know, some careers don't. So you want to kind of be eyes wide open if you go into it.
Definitely.
So
and that would be something that I would recommend when you talk about high schoolers. I would absolutely recommend that when someone is a junior, maybe a senior, but even better still, a junior, that they do something like a job shadowing. That would be really important. It gives them an idea. I remember one year when my son was in high school that everybody wanted to be a forensic scientist. And that's because there were these TV programs and they made it look like so much fun to find the dead body, you know. But the reality of it was is that these people, these kids didn't really want to do that. They see any pictures of real death and they're just kind of like, ew, you know, it was not their cup of tea at all. So it is a good idea to try seeing what's going on in the real world with a real person to give you some ideas. Yeah.
Hi Rita, I have a question. Madhura here. I
Hey.
was wondering if we are in the same job for longest amount of time, not necessarily unhappy with the job, but want to distinguish myself from the crowd. How exactly we'll go about it?
So it's interesting how you start off asking that question when you say when you're in a job for the longest amount of time, right? It already feels like you've kind of been there in for you maybe for a while, and it's kind of
Right.
like what's going to happen here. Well, how is your relationship with your boss?
It's great. It's great. But at some point, like I do feel I'm at this stagnant position where I'm not sure how soon I'm going to grow. Do have interesting projects and stuff, but uh, it's taking to the next level. That's the question I have. It's I don't know if it necessarily means a job change or maybe something else. So
Well, it definitely requires a job change. I mean, at least looking into a job change, I should say. And I think when you ask the question the way that you asked it, and if you have a good relationship with that boss, you should at least put it out on the table about what your plans are for your career with your boss. This is where I'm thinking about going. This is what I'm thinking about doing. I I don't mean to upset anybody by saying this, but a lot of times a woman will not even be spoken to about what her career aspirations are because someone will think, she's probably going to have a kid in a couple of years and she may not just be interested, not realizing that some people actually have kids and still keep their careers going. Okay. So, as a woman, the reason why I say this to you, it's more important than anything that you discuss that you have some goals as far as careers are concerned with your boss and just kind of ask him, where can we look at my career going, what can I do, what areas of advancement could happen, and are there some things that I should be doing right now to help make that advancement happen. And in the meantime too, by the way, whatever it is that you can do to add to your own knowledge, whether it's through reading or working with another person, finding a mentor in your company that maybe is a few stages up, somewhere where you see yourself you want to be. See if that person can mentor you to help you walk into a higher position. These would be good things for you to do.
thanks, Rita. That's very helpful.
Yep. Sherry?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yes. What to do when my talents does not match my interest and passion? For example, I love singing, but I cannot sing well. Is there any way to get better? Yes, I took some singing classes, but I cannot be a good singer. Okay, but I'm good at math and computer science, but I don't like it. So when we need just an example. So when we make a career transition, sometimes we want to follow our passion and interest, but we also need to look at our talents. How to balance? Any advice?
Well, one thing that I would probably do, if that's something that's coming to mind, is I would probably do a personality assessment test. My all-time favorite is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test, and I'll tell you the reason why. I've taken a few different personality assessment tests. I remember one I took in high school, and the results came back, and I was one of those kids in high school that would always sit in the back of the room, and I kind of like stayed undercover that way. And I get the assessment back, and it said, "You would be a great nun." I just, out of my mouth, I just yelled, "A nun? I was never going to be a nun. No way. I wanted to have children for one thing. How does a nun do that?" Right. So the thing is that I thought, oh, personality assessments, they stink. They had me do another one years down the road, and it stunk also. And so by the time I came up to Myers-Briggs, the only reason why I took it is because it was a condition of my being hired at the company that I was going to not only instruct people, but also I needed to become certified in giving Myers-Briggs. So I took this Myers-Briggs test, not expecting much. And the funny thing was, it was as if somebody was following me around writing notes about me. It said things like, "You view life as a game," which I do. I find it a very interesting game, and so don't get consumed by the challenges. Sometimes you can, but try not to. It said that I don't give up, that I'm tenacious about whatever it is that I move for, which is true. I mean, it just thing after thing about me came up in that Myers-Briggs. And what I noticed once I got certified is that other people that took the Myers-Briggs, it was their book too. It was their thing. So that you have a love for singing, that's not the only talent. There's a number of different talents that at the core of it, you would say, oh yeah, this too, or that too. There could be positions on there that you've never even heard of before, but that could also tap into your love of singing. It's not like you only have so many different choices. You have an array of choices. It's just a matter of finding the one that's right for you and then doing something with it, having something fun happen for yourself with it. Does that make sense, Sherry?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. You don't have voice too. Okay, who else has a question?
Rita, I just want to acknowledge the fact that you called it out, spade's a spade, which did not surprise me. That most often, I'm just thinking about your statement and looking back, I rarely had any conversations with any of my managers about where I want to grow in my career. Never did that happen before. And I just thought it is what it is, but never paid real attention to why, or is it just me? But I'm glad that you called it out because it just made me think. And I'm hoping that anyone who is listening to this meeting or participating in this meeting actually go back in their experience and see whether they were asked the same question or not, because it's a huge one. The first time that I ever got that question asked was in my current company, where my boss asked me, um, which role do you want? I will create it for you. And this is the first time, and I did not have an answer because I never thought that question will be even asked. That's even a possibility. So that's a very good one that you said it out. You called it out, saying that probably most often women are not part of those conversations when it comes to career choices. So thank you
And
for
you know,
that.
the thing is that I don't really look at the glass ceiling the same way maybe a lot of people do. I really believe that we ourselves are responsible
Mhm.
for getting rid of, as well as having maybe created it to a certain extent, but getting rid of most definitely the glass ceiling. It's up to us to do it.
Yep.
And the number one way that we do it is by communicating, right? In fact, there you are again in Toastmaster land, because it's by communicating and it's by your leadership skills. All right. I always think if someone tells me no, so what? So what? There's somebody else out there. I'll go ask someone else. So yeah, there you go. For instance, I tap dance on stage on Zoom as a hobby. Bravo. That's really good.
I would rather play bingo.
Yeah. Any
May I
other
add
questions?
something? Rita, just wanted to add, not so much a question. Is that okay?
Of course.
So I just wanted to share, I've had similar experiences like Shamala. You don't know what you don't know, so you don't really think to ask, and you just continue with your job doing well. I lived pretty late to the game, but I learned that when you talk to some women in senior positions, you will gain a lot of perspective as well, especially if it's in your own company. They might give you some ideas into how to navigate in the company and grow. Not that others will not give you advice, but it's the whole idea of having your allies and people that will help you grow.
Yep, absolutely. That's a very, very good point. Thank you for that. All right, we've got time for just one more question. So does anyone have one more question they want to throw out this direction? Well, the number one thing that I will tell you is, without trying to sound like some kind of a Saturday Night Live skit, you really are worthy of the best. And that's true not only in your personal life, of course, but in your career life too. When you consider how many hours a week you spend working, you better really love what you do. You owe that to yourself. You absolutely do. And you owe that to the people that you love, because your personality will then reflect a lot of positive energy versus if you're just miserable all the time. So do think about that. And if you have any other questions or anything, please feel free to shoot me an email and I will answer your question, usually within a day. But if I miss the mark, oh, but I'll try my best. I'm going to turn this back over to Nishant at this point, I think. All right.
Thank you, Rita. Great. Thank you so much, Rita, for your time. That was a wonderful session. I definitely I benefited a lot from it, and I hope everyone else did as well. I would like to say that this was a very short notice, but we had a lot of attendees come in. At least we had a lot of people also RSVP on the event. So thank you for your thank you so much for your time, effort, and your knowledge. And Pamela did ask a good question. What is your email address? Rita, shall I, is the ritabarber.toastmasters@gmail.com sounds good, Rita?
Yep, sounds great.